This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, September 13th, 2022, and Tuesday, September 27th, 2022 to be confirmed. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
I beg to move, Mr. Speaker, that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All of our members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 1, in the name of the Honourable Senior Minister and the Minister of Energy and Business Development, to move the second reading of the Barbados Metrology Bill 2022.
Honourable Member St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you for the opportunity to pilot this very important piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, sir, before I get off the ground, permit me just to share with you the approach that I propose to take. I intend, Mr. Speaker, to introduce the bill to this honourable chamber, but I want to caution at the outset that this piece of legislation, sir, has sweeping implications for a variety of sectors in the Barbados economy, and indeed, sir, for the government itself. And I therefore would want, after having piloted the bill, to postpone it for further consideration, as I am sure that a number of matters will arise, upon which I intend to elaborate, sir, in the interest of the fullest disclosure. Let me start, Mr. Speaker, sir, by saying that this bill is designed at its core to address issues, and I should say, sir, vexing and burning issues, which have for far too long been neglected in Barbados. Issues, for example, sir, of the core of what is the inefficiency in the economy of Barbados. We talk very loosely and glibly, and we find every reason, sir, sometimes to blame others without looking and pointing the finger at ourselves. Sometimes you have to hold up to your face, sir, a looking glass, so that you can see, sir, that the fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. There are some matters, sir, about which we as a country have absolute and unquestionable control. I intend to address some of those matters today. And if we are to get to the place where we want to be as an efficient economy and as a competitive economy, Mr. Speaker, sir, we're going to have to treat to some of these things that I intend to speak to. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, that this bill is designed to do is to take us in the direction of deepening the protection and the protective capacity of the state in the interest of consumers. Consumers, Mr. Speaker, sir, do not have I shouldn't say do not. There are one or two efforts in Barbados to formulate a voice on the part of the consumer. It is an unusual thing in a capitalist economy for a minister with responsibility, sir, for commerce and for business to have to stand in the parliament to speak on behalf of the consumer. That is not, sir, the norm. But unfortunately, sir, because of the paucity of effort made here by our own, we, sir, must confront the reality that consumer protectionism in Barbados is something that has to be given further impetus. It has to be further developed. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that one of the reasons why I come here with this particular bill is to strengthen the power of the consumer and the ability of the state to protect the consumer. And again, that perhaps is another reason why this bill will have to be postponed for some further consideration, because I believe, sir, that it will raise issues that consumers in Barbados should intelligently and properly be able to be allowed to have a say in. Not only the consumer, but equally the business sector, as I will elaborate upon as we go forward. The other reason, sir, that the bill comes, quite frankly, is because of the fact that we have to drive forward the issue of national competitiveness. And I want to say that, sir, the competitiveness of the Barbados economy must be at the forefront of our minds. These are difficult times, and simply put, it would be a foolish thing for us to continue to believe that despite all that we have heard, not only now, but for decades, about diversification of the Barbados economy, about having to rely less upon the principal instrument, traditional instrument of economic growth, which has been the tourism sector, Mr. Speaker, sir, for us to continue doing the same thing in the same way and expect a different result. I think, Mr. Speaker, that you only have to take a glance at what is happening in England to understand the significance of the point I'm making. Right now, there's tremendous volatility of the pound sterling. That is not the desire, or that was not the desire of the Chancellor of the Exchequer when he presented his first budget 2 weeks ago, but that has been the consequence of his budget. And there are those who would say that the United Kingdom is working hard on becoming the world's most leading developing country. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that with a very volatile pound, there are consequences for us. Simply put, the consequences would be that while we would still hope and wish and lobby for and anticipate that we could get plane load upon plane load upon plane load of visitors leaving the United Kingdom to come here during our winter season, or during their winter season to spend it here, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that with a volatile pound, there's tremendous uncertainty in the British market. There is not necessarily the spending capacity or the spending power of the average person in the United Kingdom. And therefore, with that uncertainty and that decreased spending capacity, sir, there may well be challenges that we have to confront. So that, sir, while you don't want it, you have to anticipate it. But we cannot forever be locked into a system where we have knee-jerk reaction after knee-jerk reaction after knee-jerk reaction. Barbados as a serious economy, doing business in a serious way with a world that is exceptionally serious in these days, Mr. Speaker, sir, must be able to carve out a space for itself and operate with an element of certainty. And that is really, sir, part of what this is about, that we will broaden the base of the Barbados economy as we are working to do, that persons who are leading the charge in the manufacturing sector, for example, sir, will be given new opportunities, new horizons, new vistas within which to play. But that at the same time, sir, we are doing the things that buttress or underpin their efforts by providing an element of certainty to that which they do. So that while I am introducing very generally some of the ideas, sir, behind the bill, I want you to understand the gravity and the significance of it, because in no way can I avoid the fact, as I said at the beginning, that there are sweeping implications for this country as a result of this piece of legislation. From the little old lady in the Paynes Bay market, sir, or in Cheapside market, or in Oistins, who is operating as a vendor and has a scale, Mr. Speaker, and you're no stranger. You're a man of the street, a man of the people and a man on the street. And you know what I'm talking about. You sit down, or she has her little scale there, and it got one side in and And put what you have on the right-hand side and the left-hand side, you can tilt that. That's still being used. Don't laugh, sir, because part of what we're talking about is the relevance of that type of technology. And when it was created, that's essentially what it was. This was new technology when it was created. But the relevance of it today, the usefulness of it today, the measurements that she is using today, those things, sir, are what we are now going to begin to rationalize for the first time in Barbados. And why we have to rationalize it, sir, is because implicit in that which they do is a level of inefficiency that hurts them. And worse yet, Mr. Speaker, sir, that hurts the consumer. And as I said, it is perhaps a peculiar thing that a minister with responsibility for business must speak as I shall have to speak on the part of the consumer today. But so be it, because these are issues that this country has failed to confront for many, many decades. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not only the small vendor, it is the largest of the manufacturers that we have. The inefficiencies, as I will demonstrate, the inefficiencies in our sector cross all levels of operation, all scales of operation, all fields of endeavor, Mr. Speaker, sir. And part of what this metrology bill is designed to do, and is designed to do a number of things, and it can't be a cure-all. It can't be a panacea for all ills. But it is designed to do a number of very critical things and to make a number of very critical interventions. And among those interventions, Mr. Speaker, as I said, is not only to rectify some of the imbalance, pardon the pun, with respect to what is taking place with the smallest of our vendors, but equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, the imbalances that are taking place with respect to some of the largest manufacturers who are operating on an export platform in Barbados, and operating on that export platform in some instances in a way that acts to their detriment, and equally so, Mr. Speaker, sir, in some instances that acts to the detriment of the earning capacity of the country, and worse yet, detriment of consumers with whom they have to treat. Now, Mr. Speaker, it therefore means, and I'm being candid with you, that I expect that even though we have done some preliminary consultations, that I will hear from the folks in Barvin, and I will hear from the folks in the Small Business Association, and I will hear, Mr. Speaker, sir, from the Barbados Manufacturers Association, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, you name it, the Private Sector Association, all of them, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there are, this is coming down the pipe at a rate that they need to have a little time to adjust to because there are issues, et cetera, et cetera. I confidently expect that. Let me say up front, sir, that this government intends to bull rush no one. Let me say that this minister, sir, will lend an ear, a listening ear, and an open heart to all who have challenges in making the adjustments that will be required to this piece of legislation. As a result of this piece of legislation, adjustments will be required for all those categories of operations that I just talked about, sir. May I also say, it is also going to impact the state because the intention is at Clause 54 of the bill to repeal the existing Weights and Measures Act, Cap 331 of the laws of Barbados. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the existing Weights and Measures Act it has outlived its usefulness. That's perhaps the nicest way of putting it. It is very limited in scope, Mr. Speaker. The categories of weighing and the categories of measuring are very limited. They are obviously still used in commerce, but not necessarily used in commerce in a way that helps us to get where we want to be as an internationally recognized competitive jurisdiction. And they speak, Mr. Speaker, sir, to, as I said, very limited scope. You're talking, sir, about weigh bridges. You'll be talking about the tanks in the petroleum industry, skills used in trade, those types of things, Mr. Speaker. But it was designed at a time where those were the relevant issues. The relevant issues in 2022 have transcended that. and have taken us, sir, to a zone of commercial activity where we have to do far better. And therefore, sir, the decision that must be taken by this country is going to be one of a philosophical nature. Are we going to cure, and this is the question, are we going to cure the self-inflicted wound that this country has, as having for too long been contented to see itself, Mr. Speaker, with a mindset of smallness and a mindset of content with what really is becoming increasingly irrelevant in the global economic landscape? Or, on the other hand, Mr. Speaker, are we going to do the things that are necessary for us to ready this country for the reality of global competition? That is the question before the country today. It is a question that has, quite frankly, been before us for a long time, but we have not necessarily engaged with the depth and with the seriousness that we should have engaged prior to now. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the legislation will speak to the use of the international system of units, and it will require for me in these initial stages of the bill to do a little bit of definition, defining what we're talking about, defining the terminology, helping you, sir, and my colleagues here, and those within earshot of my voice, and hopefully, Mr. Speaker, sir, 10 years from now, those who read Hansard and understand why there were certain dramatic upswings in economic activity in Barbados, helping to, when students 10 years from now, sir, drill down to understand how the economy of Barbados started to become a lot more competitive and why they will be looking at pieces of legislation like this, Mr. Speaker, and it is important, therefore, that the explanations of what we were about at that time, which is obviously this time, be completely understood. Now, the International System of Units, sir, has an abbreviation that will be found in the legislation of just a simple SI. And it has been around a long time. What we have done in Barbados is, again, to become very content and convenient, and frankly, Mr. Speaker, sir, a little bit lazy. And I'm going to have to say a few things today that, people don't like to hear, but as I said, I must hold up. I have a duty, sir, not to be in any offensive way, but I must hold up the looking glass to this country. Because we, sir, have contented ourselves hitherto to operating a dual system. A system of imperial measurements, which you grew up in, and which I grew up in, so that we understood yards, feet, and inches. We sat down in a classroom, Mr. Speaker, sir, with a 12-inch ruler, and we did measurements in inches. And then we went outside to play, and sir, and you had a little school sports, you were going to run 100 meters. And it never stopped, nobody ever stopped to say, but why are you teaching one thing but doing another? You live your life in one way, but you're doing another thing. So that you have, Mr. Speaker, sir, the oddity, again, I will use the market example, of somebody from Germany coming into any market in Barbados and saying that they want to get a dolphin. And they are told that the dolphin could be bought for how much ever money per pound. But the person from Germany, the person from Italy, they, sir, know nothing about pound and ounces, because the internationally recognized measurement is nothing to do with the pounds and ounces. It has long been kilograms. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, we felt then, as many of us do now, that we can't trouble ourselves to make the adjustment that the rest of the world has been making and has made. There are consequences to it, and there have been consequences to it, as I will elaborate upon. But then, Mr. Speaker, sir, we came to a point equally where we failed to accept that the SI, that abbreviation for the International System of Units, finds itself, sir, in all languages across the world, and is the world's most widely used system of measurement. And again, perhaps what we have done is to model ourselves to some extent on what we have done to some is to model ourselves to some extent, Mr. Speaker, sir, on what we see happening in the continental United States, where perhaps they are the last people to continue to use the pounds and ounces and the imperial measurement. But the truth of the matter is the Americans can get away with it because of the size of their market. And when the question that I can speak to in a little while, sir, of recalibration comes along, how do you then make sure that your instruments of measurement, which are critical to a critical tool in any economy, is the way in which you are distilling, let's say, petrol. You must be able to measure that which you are putting into a car. And when you have to make sure that the measurements are accurate, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Americans, well, they produce their own, they sell their own, they've got the scale of the economy, they can do it themselves. They're importing them from the way. Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir, however, is going to import it from overseas with one type of measurement specification. We are going to use instruments in Barbados, sir, which are calibrated in a different type of measurement specification. And then we find, sir, that there are losses in quantification. And you ask yourself, in between all of that, what is the consequence? Because that sounds a little academic. The consequence, Mr. Speaker, sir, is seepage. In one word, that's what this bill is about. Avoiding seepage of money. Leakage of a cent here and a cent there. And if you're thinking in terms, sir, of 10,000 liters being sold in a day at any one particular location for gasoline, and you leak out a cent, Mr. Speaker, sir, you're leaking out a cent per liter, then you're leaking out 10,000 cents. And Mr. Speaker, so when you get to 100,000 liters, you're talking about a lot of money. In fact, frankly, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the consequences that I'm talking about when I speak about the economic inefficiencies that when you drill down into this economy, you continue to find. I will elaborate on it further. So that, sir, that international system of units was established and has been maintained by a general conference, internationally recognized general conference on weights and measures. It is the only system of measurement, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you, the only system of measurement with official status. And as I said, it is to be utilized, it is now being utilized in virtually every country on earth. And it is utilized across all spheres of commerce and commercial activity, whether that be commercial activity domestically or across and between borders, between countries. And it is utilized, sir, in industry, it is utilized in science, it is utilized in technology. So the convenience of having 1 foot inside the doorway and 1 foot outside the doorway is starting, in simple language, to hurt this country. We gotta take a position. You can't sit down on the fence forever. Are we with the rest of the world, or are we not with the rest of the world? I want to make it as simple to understand as possible. Are we, Mr. Speaker, sir, prepared to do the things necessary to be consistent with what is required to be a globally recognized competitive economy, or are we going to continue to say to ourselves, man, that's a little too hard, that's too much trouble, I ain't really committing myself to this full sweeping change of the system. And it is not that we can say any longer that use of kilograms or, Mr. Speaker, sir, measurement, sir, in kilometers per hour, for example, is something new. That is no longer new. But for us, sir, we have chosen not to go at the speed that the rest of the world has gone. If I could give you an analogy, sir, because it is not only in that's what going to hold up the looking glass to this country. I have a very candid conversation because it is about the productivity of the nation. And I must speak, therefore, to the Parliament, sir, as a person charged with oversight of the productive sectors is expected to speak. If we know, all of us know, that our neighboring markets, the closest markets to us of scale, speak the language called Spanish. And if we know this, Mr. Speaker, and we know that it is important to be able to communicate with those neighboring markets, we know that there is a legitimate reason why we would want to build closer relationships with them and our major area of commercial activity, which is tourism. And that critical reason is, sir, not just that they're next door, not just, sir, that there is some curiosity about the Spanish language, Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, but the reality is that we can't forever bottle ourselves in or box ourselves into being a warm weather getaway from people from the North Atlantic. I've said so in this house several times. That is the reason why the African continent and the Latin American continent become exceptionally important. Because unless we reach out to them, Mr. Speaker, sir, we will forever be just a warm weather getaway, and we will see our tourism being very seasonal. We will see, Mr. Speaker, sir, that same tourism product being something that is fantastic in terms of its opportunities to employ people en masse during November, December, January, February, March, and then it goes into a slump for the rest of the year. Whereas, sir, if we looked at the Latin American continent, we look at Africa, sir, we're able then to build out other frames, other aspects of tourism, sir, which lend the economy a dynamism that it must have. It cannot be that our major sector is a 6-month sector. It has to be a year-round sector. Nowhere else in the world is there an economy that builds out, a successful economy that has built out itself around enterprise that thrives for 6 months. And that is really to give an example or another example of where we have failed ourselves. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, with respect to the matter which is at bar, this country, therefore, sir, has to be prepared to look at the international system and recognize that it comprises a coherent system of units of measurement. And it is within that coherent system of units of measurement, sir, that global certainty is achieved by way of having precise readings. Now, what are some of these readings that we have to look at? Because as I told you, sir, we have, again, stymied. We tie your hand behind your back and attach the rope that tie your hand down to your ankle and expect that you're going to fight with the international community. So we got a system of weights, a piece of legislation, Cap 331, the Weights and Measurement Act, that we're outdated. Nowhere in there, sir, are they going to tell you about measuring luminous intensity. But we are in a country dealing with renewable energy. People are trying to make lighting in Barbados. And therefore, if you're going to make the lighting facility, you're going to sell that which you make. And you therefore must measure your luminous intensity. Does that make sense, Mr. Speaker, sir? But if you have an overarching piece of legislation that is silent on how you measure that luminous intensity, well, how does it help anybody get anywhere? So that the reality of where the economy and people in the economy are trying to go, as compared to where the law is, suggests that there's a gulf between the two, a chasm. So that you have to have now language in law that speaks to luminous intensity measured by way of the candela. Now again, Mr. Speaker, sir, that light bright, that's how we would suffice to say, that light bright. But you can only tell how bright it is if you're able to measure by way of the candela the luminous intensity. Equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I indicated to you before, we have toyed around for a long time with the measurement of length being the meter, and the measurement of mass being the kilogram, sir. It goes on and on. Our air conditioning and refrigeration people. We train young people here in air conditioning and refrigeration. We send them to school. Taxpayers' money paying, Mr. Speaker, sir, so that they can be trained. Thermodynamic temperature, sir, becomes an issue when you have to be able to measure it. And it can only be measured in kelvins. Internationally, that is the measurement standard. Who in Barbados tell you anything about a Kelvin? But Mr. Speaker, that is just to look at the language that we are failing to use. But it is also tied in, sir, to the economics and the economic consequences of what we are doing. So I start by saying, sir, that the system, the international system that we are now committing ourselves to join fully and unequivocally is a system, sir, that accommodates coherent units for an unlimited number of additional quantities of derived units. And that system, sir, is an evolving system. It is precise because of the fact, sir, that as technology of measurement increases, then the capacity to be more precise with measurement increases. And so therefore, sir, it is recognized now around the world that the system of international units continues to evolve to provide more precision and more coherence, because everybody in the world is moving or has come to a point where they coalesce around one type of measurement. And so whether I am selling a leg of ham in Barbados, or whether I'm selling that leg of ham in Chile, or whether I'm selling that leg of ham in the United Kingdom, or whether I'm selling it in Germany, Mr. Speaker, sir, the weight 1 kilogram means something and can be tested with precision. If it is being sold, sir, in a pound in Barbados, but translated elsewhere to be in a kilogram, the risk of imprecision becomes very great. And with every time that you make those adjustments, Mr. Speaker, sir, you're losing a little cent here and a couple cents there. And the people with money, like my learned friends, like my friend sitting to my right, sir, people with real money understand that every cent counts.
Imagine if it was gold.
Yes, as
Gold
you said.
versus a kilogram of gold.
A pound of gold versus a kilogram of gold makes a large difference, Mr. Speaker, sir. So that I start by saying, sir, just to set the framework, that the entire world is moved to this system of measurement and trade and the system of regulation and conduct of commerce, and now are speaking to it with one voice. Now, above and beyond conformity with international best practice, there is another philosophical, or a couple of philosophical reasons why I think we would want to go this way, Mr. Speaker. We live in a world of change that is being thrust upon us. We know, we hear all the time, we experience the climate change issue. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are on the front line of that. We are also on the front line of the pandemic and the changes brought about by the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, I don't think anybody in Barbados has to be taught about that. We lived it. Then there's the global supply chain disruption, another set of change that has been thrust upon us, Mr. Speaker, sir. This system that we are trying to introduce today, or beginning the process of introducing today, offers certainty in a world of change. It gives the consumer in Barbados, your constituent, Mr. Speaker, sir, and mine, for the first time, an opportunity to have precision and certainty on the supermarket shelf, in the marketplace, at the petrol pump. That is one of the things that the consumer must have, in my judgment, Mr. Speaker, but which the consumer has not had in Barbados. The precision and the certainty that when they are doing their trade, when they're conducting their commerce, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the seepage that I talked about is not taking place, that the overcharging of a couple cents, that the undercharging that takes place to the detriment of the person who is doing the selling, in some cases, is not taking place. It also then, Mr. Speaker, sir, because of the way in which the act is struck, the bill will be struck, or the bill is structured and the act will be structured, sir, is offering a level of protection to our consumers. A body of inspectors will be part of this act. And quite frankly, they're also part of the Weights and Measures Act. But what's the difference? That the inspectors are themselves held to a level of precision and a standard with which they must do that which they do, and the instruments they use must be held equally to a certain standard. And that standard, that the instruments that they use are going to be held to, is a standard that conforms with and is duplicated to the same extent by every other entity which is following this system, Mr. Speaker. So the world is part of the process, and we are buying into a global process of measurement. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, above and beyond offering certainty to the consumer where previously little or none existed, above and beyond offering protection to the consumer, Mr. Speaker, sir, in a way that did not previously exist, is the question, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the end result. It gives us a nation where we can have confidence as a body of consumers. And you, sir, are a consumer. I am a consumer. Our constituents are consumers. And what they need to have is the confidence of knowing that they function in an economic environment where they do not have to be constantly second-guessing. And I will demonstrate some of the challenges that our consumers have, where they do not have to be constantly second-guessing to see whether they're getting a fair shake or whether they're getting a raw deal. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that is the purpose and intent behind this legislation. So that I start by saying that I accept fully that the system of imperial measurements which we have used is one with which the rest of the world is no longer aligned. And quite frankly, it is one, sir, that is globally unacceptable. Now, there are going to be some definitions, as I said, that we have to work our way through. The first definition really is that this piece of legislation requires, consistently with international trade today, that there be a thing called metrological traceability. Highfalutin language. What is metrological traceability? It refers, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the calibration of instruments, the consistency of measurement across the system, so that you have traceability that is verifiable internationally. And the legislation defines it as a documented standard of measurement through or across an unbroken chain of comparisons and calibrations, conducted by any regulatory agency or standards development organization. And that's a mouthful, Mr. Speaker. Let me break it down. Essentially, what you're saying is that you're going to have a documented standard of measurement. The legislation provides for the Barbados National Standards Institute to create that standard of measurement with respect to any endeavor of a commercial nature that takes place in Barbados, so that we will have an intervention now in our market where there is a standard for measuring the way in which the transaction takes place. And that documented standard, sir, is proven to be consistent across an unbroken chain of similar standards by regulatory agencies around the world. So that when once, sir, you have introduced that standard in Barbados, it must conform to and be confirmed by those agencies of a similar type around the world, wherever they are to be found. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, there is an international reference with respect to the standard that we're using. And, sir, there is an international reference with respect, sir, to the type of equipment that we use for measurement. The other area that requires some definition is called scientific metrology. And that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is about the organization and the development of measurement and measurement standards. And one of those measurement standards, as I just indicated, Mr. Speaker, sir, was at one time the imperial system with the pounds and ounces and yards, feet, and inches. It is now, sir, the international system of units, and that is the scientific metrologically accepted international standard, the gold standard, so to speak. Then, Mr. Speaker, sir, we come now to the juicy piece of this legislation at long last, the industrial metrology. And the industrial metrology, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the application of the science of measurement to industry and to the practice of industry. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, therefore, to the manufacturing sector in Barbados. And beyond that, Mr. Speaker, there is the question of legal metrology, perhaps even more exciting. And this is really where the meat of the matter is in this debate, that there is a role for government to play in the public interest in these matters. And this is where I take issue, sir, with the history of this country and the way in which we have treated to the consuming public in Barbados. Because legal metrology, properly understood, indicates that there is a role for government to play by way of intervention in the sector and the commercial landscape of the country, Mr. Speaker, sir, acting in the interest of the public. We do this, but how do we do it? And we know we do it. We do it by way of ensuring public safety, for example. That's one example. And in terms of public safety, the concept of a police speed check comes to mind. I sit in front of 2 lawyers, 3 lawyers, in fact 4, I sit in front of 4 lawyers here, Mr. Speaker. And they will know that a police speed check is done by a radar. Now, the public interest is that you want to make sure that people are speeding. But that radar has to be properly calibrated. Because the difference between my going at 60 miles an hour and you telling me I'm going at 70 miles an hour may cost me $1,000 in 7 days or 7 days in prison. Not true? So that the public safety issue is an intervention by the state to ensure that there's police equipped with radar to ensure checks are done in the interest of the wider safety of the traveling public. But if it is not done by way of an instrument of measurement that is properly maintained, if it is not done by way of an instrument of measurement that is precise, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, the consequences to me as the private citizen can be exceptionally difficult to carry and burdensome. It is not only with the radar, Mr. Speaker, sir. I hope to live in a Barbados that will one day see the introduction of breathalyzers. I confess that I hope to live in that Barbados. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, I also feel that the caution that must be built out around the introduction, and I'm not saying on the floor of this House that this government is ready to introduce breathalyzers. I am saying that I would like to see a Barbados in which they're used. But I also say that I want to be in a Barbados, sir, or anywhere in the world, that is using breathalyzers in a way that accords with the best practice in terms of the maintenance and operation, the standard of the operation of the breathalyzer, the precision of the measurement and calibration of the breathalyzer. Because there have been cases, as you're well aware, sir, of places where people are told that they haven't been tested for use of a breathalyzer, that their blood alcohol level is too high, when in fact it may not have been because the machine that is used for the testing is improperly calibrated. Consequences are 3 months in prison because you were driving under the influence of alcohol, loss of liberty, loss of income, deprivation of association with your family, etc., etc. So there are consequences to the citizen, Mr. Speaker, and that is part of where the role of government acting in the public interest comes in. It isn't only there. We've just come out of a pandemic phase. Hopefully, it will disappear. But the fact of the matter is, sir, that it raised obvious public health issues. And there were, in the interest of the public health interventions relating, again, to measurement. So that we had all of a sudden the upsurge of thermometers, which are temperature thermometers, COVID-19 temperature thermometers. And we were all around Barbados, and a man take a little handgun, looking something, and point it to your temple, and no, your temperature too high, you can't come in here. No, your temperature good, you can. And Mr. Speaker, sir, part of the national conversation has not, and I hope will one day be, how are all of them, or how were all of them being calibrated? And against what standard? How efficiently was the calibration done? So that even though you intervene in the interest of the wider public, the intervention has to be, sir, consistent with standards of measurement, which are precise, which are double-checked, triple-checked, and quadruple-checked, not only here in Barbados, but by similar agencies around the world, ensuring that there is transparency and consistency of the standard being applied. And if that does not happen in any given country or in any given economy, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is cause for concern. And in similar ways, Mr. Speaker, sir, environmental protection, there are some parts of Barbados, for example, where people will complain and have legitimately complained about noise at night. I ain't talking about just a kite, I'm talking sometimes about effect and the music levels. So you call in the police, public interest again, and the police must come and they must do an analysis, sir. But with what? What are the mechanisms for them to measure noise level? And if they do exist, Mr. Speaker, at what standard are they being applied? And is the equipment itself being calibrated and maintained in a way to give certainty as to the measurements that are being used to determine whether your freedom to associate in the way you choose to associate, especially if it is an association that is earning you revenue, is being done in a manner that is not detrimental to your interests as a private citizen. You understand what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker? So there are a range of things. And frankly, some of the most fundamental areas of concern, and we take a lot of this for granted. This is not the stuff that you sit down and talk about in the barber shop or in the rum shop, but it has to be something about which we as a country now become very aware, because it even has implications for the capacity of the state to tax. And without tax, my constituents can't get roads fixed. Without tax, my constituents can't get street lights. Without tax, my constituents can't ride on the bus free. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are the realities. Healthcare is compromised. Education is compromised, Mr. Speaker. So, how then is measurement related to taxation? That is the difficult issue that people might not understand. It's where the conversation has to go, because it has never gone there before. And if we're going to build out an economy that is truly competitive, truly able to reach international standards, Mr. Speaker, sir, and best practices, Mr. Speaker, sir, and to avoid the doldrums of sluggishness that have locked us down for far too long, Mr. Speaker, then we have to be in a position where we have these kind of conversations. And so, therefore, enabling taxation must mean that calibration, sir, of the VATs and VAT, and the calibration, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the tanks, for example, in the rum sector, the rum industry sector, is something that can be done accurately so that you can tax on the basis of that which you are finding, and on the basis, Mr. Speaker, sir, of precision in measurement to ensure fairness not only to the Crown, well, I can't say the Crown anymore, the Republic, the state, so as to get the revenue, but equally, sir, without unfairing or being in any way disadvantageous to the person in the private sector whose interests are being measured. Now, sir, this legislation, therefore, is breaking new ground because it's doing a couple of things which are important. The first is creating a comprehensive Metrology Act and putting an end to the dual system that now exists. As I said, a system of imperial measurements working hand in hand and alongside the system of international units of measurement. Then, Mr. Speaker, sir, the second thing that it does is to take us to the point where we have a decentralized model, and that is seen as a global best practice. The Barbados National Standards Institute under this bill will be charged as being the strategic trade facilitation partner for industry and for business enterprise. What does that mean? It means, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the Minister of Industry can now reach out to the Barbados National Standards Institute, or, for example, Mr. Speaker, sir, Export Barbados can reach out to the Barbados National Standards Institute, or any other agency, the Barbados Manufacturers Association, with a view to getting them to help work with them, the National Standards Institute, work with that agency, and making sure that the companies and the businesses that fall under the umbrella of the Barbados Manufacturers Association are able to lift their game and meet the standards that are internationally expected and are seen as best practices. That collaboration and cross-fertilization of effort, Mr. Speaker, has been woefully missing and absent from the landscape of the Barbados economy for far too long. In fact, the history of Barbados in recent times will show that there is a practice in our private sector of calling in the Barbados National Standards Institute for one or two little things. So that, for example, sir, if you want to test the soundness of concrete in the construction sector, then you will call them in and let's get the measurements done and so on. But it is not a norm across all areas of enterprise. In a truly competitive economy, Mr. Speaker, it must become a norm that is part and parcel of the daily endeavor. You are walking hand in hand with your national standards entity. And I hate to say from the floor of this house, sir, but I am compelled to hold up the looking glass, hold up the mirror to this country so that we can see ourselves for what we are. That on the day that I took my first briefing, Mr. Speaker, as Minister responsible for Commerce in Barbados, I was notified then that there were less than 40 enterprises in Barbados which had a working relationship with the Barbados National Standards Institute. And when you hear that figure, but then you recognize that there are close to 10,000 businesses operating in this country as registered as small, and several thousand others registered as medium and large, Mr. Speaker. I ain't even getting to the international business sector. Let's carve them out completely. You realize, sir, that it is not even scratching the surface, that we were dealing with an economy in which it was a happy-go-lucky free-for-all, and that people were doing their own thing without necessarily having any reference to the Barbados National Standards Institute, which should be a guiding hand with respect to not only just the standards of your operation, but ensuring that your operation is meeting international best practices, which are required if you're going to move to an export level platform. But then we ask ourselves, why, Mr. Speaker? Why does the economy of the country continue to stand on one leg? Why is it that we are looking at tourism as being the panacea? We look in that direction, Mr. Speaker, sir, because in many ways we sell ourselves short by not investing heavily enough in the standards body, which is designed and created to make sure that you can do that which you do, not only with precision in terms of measurement, but in accordance with internationally expected best practices, which lay a foundation for you then to get past trade barriers and enter other people's marketplaces so that you sell the goods that you produce, that you sell the services that you provide across borders and earn the country foreign exchange. It is not a difficult concept to understand. But one of the stepping stones that we have failed to utilize, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that here in this country, we had one of the region's first, if not the very first, National Standards Institutes. But it is also, prior to now, one of the most underutilized because there was, in the private sector, a view that this was not a priority. Now, I beg the question of you, Mr. Speaker. How do I get my goods into the marketplace in Europe? How do I get my goods into the marketplace in Latin America or in Asia, sir, if I am not going to become familiar with the expected level of standard required by that market that is being asked to host and accept my good or my product or my service? And if I am not familiar and I don't have any entity working with me in order to make sure that not only that I become familiar, but that I can become compliant with the expected standard, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, my capacity to function to the maximum ability is compromised. Not a difficult thing to understand, I submit. But, Mr. Speaker, that is the road that we were walking. So that is part of what this is about. It is about lifting the ability of our enterprises to trade across borders in a way that allows this country to derive the necessary foreign exchange, sir, to come to the point of economic competitiveness and at a rate and at a speed, at a rate and in a scope, sir, that satisfies some of the concerns that we have for development. The decentralized model that the bill contemplates, Mr. Speaker, sir, is also a best practice because while you're allowing the BNSI to become a strategic trade facilitating partner for industry and business enterprise, and I want to emphasize that because sometimes I get the impression that people feel that the role of the BNSI is only if you are a manufacturer. Frankly speaking, Mr. Speaker, sir, the BNSI is now out there working with enterprises in the service sector in Barbados, working with small businesses in Barbados, helping them to become compliant, sir, with best practices. And it must be seen as something of a practice wicket for us here in Barbados, to use a cricketing analogy, a practice wicket, man, that we are going to make sure that we do our best while trading amongst ourselves, that we make sure that the domestic market is treated to the best practices, standards of the international community. When once we have gotten to that point where we can treat ourselves at that way as though the member for St. St. Michael East matters as a customer, as though his business and his expectations are requirements of best practice. When once we can get to treating the black boy from in the Ivy, as he would call himself, in that way, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, it becomes second nature to treat to the foreign market in the United States in the same way. It becomes second nature to lift our game to treat to the United Kingdom in the same way, because we have made the effort. But what I say to this country, sir, through you, is that we have failed to make that effort. And the testimony of the failure to make that effort, sir, lies in the fact that you could have had 40-odd businesses having a working relationship with the National Standards Institute a few years ago. Because it tells you, sir, that men on a frolic of their own, and that the National Standards Institute is seen as a peripheral body, when in fact, it is a cog in the wheel that is essential if we are going to seriously talk about development. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, is about that, not just philosophically, but that in practice. Bringing the National Standards Institute into alignment with economic activity in this country in a way that we have not done it before, and using the economic and using the National Standards Institute, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I do not apologize for saying this, using it to leverage the development of best practices within the economic setting of Barbados. We just can't hope and pray and let this be about serendipity and good fortune that one or two people will get it right and be content to see 5,000 failing to get it right, and then wonder why it is that the Minister of Finance here must turn gray because you're looking for foreign exchange. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality is we have to earn it, and that we can earn it, and that we have the products that will be able to meet the standard. But we have to hold the hand of business enterprises, large and small, and stop fooling ourselves with foolish flattery in the view that there are some enterprises which are too big to fail, that there are some enterprises that because they are big are not inefficient. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is not the reality of this country. I don't want to get caught up in some of the realities of Barbados. But you and I both know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that some men get large simply because this country, sir, has some entrenched inequalities of opportunity. So if you're born the right place, born the right time, born to the right family with the right skin color, Mr. Speaker, sir, you can get things done in Barbados that have nothing to do with competence. I am not supposed to say that, but that's a reality. But the fact of the matter is, sir, don't let it fool you that it means that there are not inherent inefficiencies in the system that stand in the way of carrying a body of enterprise, a body of enterprises, to the point where there can be of export potential and export success, and build intergenerational wealth for the people in this country. That is what this bill is about. So that when they came to me, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the recommendations, and I had the first sit down, and I am being told about the units of measurement and the amperes and the lumens and the kelvins, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I am being shown the arithmetical calculations done by Karl Planck, who in designing what the kilogram was is defined it as the taking of fixed numerical value of the Planck constant, which will be measured and designated by the letter H to be 6.6260715 by 10 to the minus 34 when expressed in the unit J, which is equal to kilograms M2 S to the minus 1, where meters and seconds are defined in terms of C. Mr. Speaker, sir, if you get caught up in that, that is for the scientists. That's for the scientists. But I have, sir, to look at the appropriate scientific intervention. I have no quarrel with scientific intervention. I confess, sir, I did not think while I was being inattentive in physics at secondary school that I would be compelled to draw heavily on such residual memory as I do have. I did not think that that day would arise, but arise it did. But Mr. Speaker, I can't get caught up in the science. There's merit in the science. What I have to be caught up with, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to distill the science, to identify, to define, and to share the opportunity to extrapolate from the science now of the arithmetical science into the social sciences, where I can now extrapolate the opportunity and to demonstrate without fear of contradiction, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the opportunities that should be created could be created and should have been created before. Let me not forget that, should have been created before, in order for us to get this country to where it needs to be in terms of productivity, where it needs to be in terms of foreign exchange potential and earning, where it needs to be in terms of competitiveness, Mr. Speaker, where it must be, sir, if we are to sit at a table with the rest of the world as equals and not hope that somebody gonna let something drop, a scrap drop from the end of their table and we catch it happily and say thanks. That's what this bill ultimately is about, sir. So that I say that, above and beyond the decentralizing of it, so that you give the National Standards Institute the opportunity now to be an integral part in national economic development, which it should have been long time ago. It must also be, sir, that we take the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs and allow it to perform a regulatory function, Mr. Speaker. And that regulatory function is defined in this bill as a National Legal Metrology Authority. And that is, in simple layman's language, there must be an authority in Barbados at long last. Hallelujah. There's going to be an authority in Barbados, sir, that ensures awareness and protection of the public. Awareness by the public and protection of the public, Mr. Speaker, sir, from some of the tragedies that take place in this economy, some of the infelicities that take place in this economy, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that is part of what this has to be about. Now, I feel, Mr. Speaker, that, despite the obvious complexity associated with the legislation, and I should pause while I'm here to say that I inherited this, sir, as something of a work in progress. My friend who is now returned to the House, the honourable member for St. George South, would have, in the initial stages of this, as I call it, the complexity, been in the chair. I know, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is again part of what this administration is about. The Prime Minister likes to say that it's like a vacuum cleaner administration. We clean up, clean up, clean up. But we won't just clean up, sir. We've got to build out, create new opportunities. Opportunities that exist now for ordinary people in Barbados that want to earn a living, that were told that they have no choice but to wait for a politician to get them a job. I stood in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, sir. You were not about here then. The honourable member for St. Thomas wasn't here at the time. The member for St. Michael East wasn't here at the time. When a member stood in this place, Mr. Speaker, and talk about, if you want to talk about jobs, tell me who I should send home. Because he was Lord and Master in command of your destiny. That employment was about a politician either sending you home or bringing you in. And to be in any way or form hoping to see survival, you therefore bow and scrape and lick the boots of a political figure. That's what we are about, Mr. Speaker, sir. We're about bringing legislative interventions that facilitate the growth and the development of opportunities in Barbados for categories of our citizens who have been underserved through decades. Underserved and kept underprivileged, Mr. Speaker, sir, through decades. That is what this is about. And so therefore, despite the complexity, sir, I have to invite you to bear with me because I want you to understand the practical commercial value of what we are doing. So I go back to some of the difficult definitions. There's a concept in here, sir, called a working standard. That has to be set by the Barbados National Institute, National Standards Institute, this concept of a working standard. And effectively what it means is that you are now going to have a standard of verification or measurement of instruments of any type used, and verification of measuring systems which are used by that body of inspectors who must go forth into all corridors of commerce in Barbados and interface with the people who are conducting business of all types in Barbados, in the certain knowledge that those people who are conducting business must have a degree of comfort in knowing that when they come in there to conduct their measurements, that the inspectors are doing so in conformity with standards where the instrument itself has been compelled to conform with certain international expectations, and that the means being used by the inspectors to conduct their testing of whatever type is a method which complies with international standards of measuring systems. So it sounds a little complex, Mr. Speaker, so I'm going to walk you through the legislation. Now, around 3 o'clock this morning, I started the process because I anticipated that I would have to go about it this way, trying to break down some of the key areas. So in this legislation, sir, at clause 21, it says no inspector shall use a working standard or any measuring instrument in the course of performing his functions or exercising his powers unless that working standard or measuring instrument has been calibrated in accordance with this act. You understand where we're going? Now, you can't come into my place of business and conduct the measurements that you want to conduct without that certainty being placed in my mind that when you knock on my door and you get access to come in to do what you want to do, that the measurements that you are the measuring instruments that you are using have to be kept calibrated in accordance with what this act sets out. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, I got to talk about the consumers and protect the consumers here on the floor of this House. But equally, you can't unfair the business people. Equally, they must be given satisfaction of knowing, sir, that if the measuring standards are not maintained by the state, because the state has the responsibility of setting out in accordance with the act. The only people who can set out in the act is the state. And the measurement standards, sir, the instruments working standard has to be set by the state, but it has to be applied. The maintenance of the equipment by the state. The recalibration of the equipment must be done by the state. And as I said to you at the very beginning, Mr. Speaker, sir, it places an onus and a burden on the state to be able to deliver of itself in conformity with the expectations of this act. That is why I have no difficulty with pausing this for further consideration, because I know that I am going to hear, are you sure you're ready? Are you sure we are ready? Sorry, Mr. Speaker, sir. Yeah. Right. Okay. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, yeah, the question that I will be asked is, are you sure you're ready? Are you sure that we are ready? Are you sure that the state is ready? Because, Mr. Speaker, you and I got to be candid. We can't come in here and be mealy-mouthed about this. This is heavy lifting. Government, it is commonly understood in Barbados, has a history of bad maintenance of everything. It is commonly understood. Vehicles in government, who says that they're well maintained? Buildings in government, who says that they're well maintained? The facilities offered to the public by government, community resource centers, etc., who says they're well maintained? So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are placing a burden, but we must. We have no choice, sir. If we are going to rise to the level that is expected of us to deliver for this economy, and let me take it out of the realm now of the four corners of the bill. Let's talk real talk. That we got a prime minister who has told the country that she wants to get to double-digit growth this year. Well, we know that the double-digit growth can't come from one sector alone. We know. So therefore, it got to come, Mr. Speaker, through the efforts, the dint of labor, my friend, the Honourable Minister for Industry. We got the dint of labor, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the energy sector, which I have the privilege to lead. The dint of labor, Mr. Speaker, sir, through the housing sector. Again, my friend, for St. George South. The dint of labor, Mr. Speaker, sir, through so many other sectors. Shortly, this House will have an opportunity to debate a national sports policy, in which I would want to think every member will see automatically the wisdom of monetizing sports in Barbados and developing the professionalism of our sports people, because the revenue earning potential is almost immeasurable. And sir, those are the kinds of developmental conversations that we have to have. But in order, sir, for us to get where we want to get with this particular approach, sir, it means, therefore, that the state must be able to carry the load and the burden that it must carry. And I know I'm going to be told that we have to have some serious thought given to how we can make sure that the state don't drop the ball, because this act, this bill, sir, binds the state. Now, the monitoring of business and the protecting of business interests from being disadvantaged by faulty instruments is the critical component of that section of the legislation. But I go further, Mr. Speaker, sir. No person at clause 22, no person shall use a measuring instrument which gives an inaccurate measurement which is outside the appropriate limits of error. And let me pause to say that the legislation contemplates that from time to time, instruments of measurement will be in error, but that error must fall within what you call an appropriate limit. So if it is an instrument which is measuring length, Mr. Speaker, sir, you may give or take a couple millimeters. But you can't come and tell me that you're 4 centimeters and that is within the appropriate limit. If I gotta break it down, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am charged with going at how many ever kilometers an hour, and you may have an appropriate limit, an error there that you will say, okay, fine. Even if it was not efficiently calibrated, 1 kilometer an hour more or 2 kilometers more, fine. But if I show up before you, sir, even with you as counsel, even with you, Mr. Speaker, sir, yeah, even with him as counsel, sir, and I am 40 kilometers over. Well, I don't know what you would tell, what you could find to tell the court. Except pack your suitcase and your toothbrush. So the reality is, Mr. Speaker, that is what we're talking about. So that you want the measurement to be accurate, and if the measuring instrument is given is an inaccurate measurement, which is outside appropriate limits of error, then there is a penalty in law. And that means, sir, that, again, the Crown is bound, and that the Crown, when I say the Crown, the state is bound, and that the state will therefore, sir, be, through its agent, guilty of an offense. And the person who is conducting that inspection will themselves, sir, find that they or the director will be liable to face summary conviction. And so that people would understand the seriousness of it, it could be up to a fine of $5,000. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are placing an onus, before I even get to what the private sector got to talk about, and must lift their game to be able to embrace. We are recognizing that as a point of departure, we are placing a burden, unprecedented burden, on the state to be able to deliver, and that failure to treat to this matter seriously and to maintain equipment in accordance with certain standards can result in a $5,000 penalty. You understand what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker? If you don't understand, sir, I take the opportunity to break it down for you in language that you might understand, because one of the things that vex me is that I will go into the depot for my constituency, the MTW depot, and I will be told there's no equipment to fix the roads in my constituency. In fact, I've been to the depot, heard that there's no equipment, and furthermore get cursed because of my concerns that there ain't no more equipment. All that I've been through. All that I've been through, sir. Get cursed. Curse stink too. Because politicians send me here, you can't tell me now who's you. I was told that. But Mr. Speaker, sir, that cannot be the culture of our public sector. The culture of our public sector must now be to have a sense of responsibility, that if there are certain things within your care, that you are an agency of intervention by the state for the public good. And therefore, there must be a sense, sir, of responsibility in treating to the equipment that is in your hands. I hope that makes it clearer, sir. Now, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the things that we have to confront. Now, I want to spend a little time, Mr. Speaker, sir, on what I consider to be the gravamen of this bill, because, as I indicated, sir, there is an aspect of this that causes an element of shock and awe. I had asked for, and the Barbados National Standards Institution has provided me with, sir, a study on price verification and scales. They have not gone, sir, beyond scales, but we can deal with several other areas of measurement across the economy of Barbados. On the basis of what I will speak to now, sir, I fear that the inefficiencies across the economy of Barbados run deep and run wide. And this is part of what now I anticipate will be the requirement of the private sector to take stock of the situation. The Chamber of Commerce and the Barbados Private Sector Association to bring now their influence as umbrella organizations to make sure that those agencies under their remit, even Barvin, bring the entities under your remit to a Christian understanding that this kind of thing cannot continue in the Barbados economy if we are, as a people, not to collectively fail. And I don't think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that anybody wakes up a morning in Barbados and sets about to see how disastrous they can make this country. But as a people, sir, we have to be committed to recommit and rededicate ourselves to a course and to a journey of lifting our game collectively, lest we all fail. And let us not fool ourselves. There are societies and economies within this region that have been written off as failed societies. It don't just happen so. It comes about as a result of systemic and systematic neglect and failure to intervene, and sometimes willingness to turn a blind eye to foolishness when it is taking place, and a deaf ear to warnings when they are raised. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said to the International Business Association annual general meeting last week, you know, you don't have to wait for an international agency, international supervisory agency to come and say to you what you can look at yourself and see, what you can look at yourself and fix, what you can look at yourself and determine that by dint of your own effort you're going to rectify. We should be in a position where we are predicting these are the things that we need to do in order to be top of the game, first in class, and therefore let us do them. But if we fail to do that, Mr. Speaker, sir, and we become creatures of our own comfort, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, we will have a problem. So I am indebted, sir, to the folks at the Barbados National Standards Institute who have performed the research on this study, and I am going to make it a document of the House, sir. As you see, I have a copy for your honor and for my colleagues to spend a little time looking at too, because I would want to hope and urge that this becomes part of the discussion as we go forward. Now, the question to be answered is, what is the level of confidence that consumers can have in the labeling information specific to net and gross weights of prepackaged food produce and for produce in general? And the study seeks to verify the accuracy of weight labeling and information relative to food content on prepackaged net and gross produce from 5 randomly selected retail outlets in Barbados. 1 community mini mart and 1 fresh produce market. So you have 5 randomly selected outlets, 1 fresh produce market, and 1 community mini mart. And we have, we have gone into these places and we have conducted this study, Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to ascertain the question that must be linked to this effort. That is whether consumers are receiving value for their purchases. And I, sir, bite my lip sometimes when I hear the things that I hear about cost in this country. Because while many of the criticisms are real, while the concerns, Mr. Speaker, sir, are legitimate, we are only telling ourselves the convenient part of the story. What we have to be prepared is to have a holistic discussion about the way in which consumers are being affected in terms of value for their purchases with respect to pricing in Barbados. And this is an example of it with respect to food. Now, the methodology, sir, I believe you're a social scientist, so you will have some immediate understanding that if the methodology is bad, the whole thing is flawed. And I, sir, it would be remiss of me to bring a flawed survey to you. So let me start by saying that we looked at online retail store price surveys, telephone retail price surveys, so you call in, and on-site retail store price surveys, so that you go into the store itself to verify that which you find. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the methodology then took us to the laboratory activities. So the Barbados National Standards Institution uses its laboratory activities, sir, to assist with this survey, which the Ministry of Commerce needs to have done. The samples were weighed to confirm the gross and net weights, and the data was recorded for quantitative analysis. We looked at not only dry goods, sir, but we also look at chicken, and we look at fish too, so that we get a mix of what the consumers are going to be purchasing, Mr. Speaker. And the measurement devices used within the laboratory included recently calibrated scales. And so therefore, sir, the question of precision, balance, and so on are not an issue. Because the National Standards Institution, before they do it, made sure that their house was entirely in order. As it must be, because this is the only way that we can get folks to understand the crisis that we are facing. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, I'm going to make it a document of the House. The first sample product is a product called Mum's Sugar. The labeled net weight, sir, of this sample product was 1,800 grams. The recorded gross weight, sir, was 1,696.3 grams. Are you with me? The labeled net weight is 1,800 grams. But when you put the sugar and the package on top of the scale, recently calibrated scale, you have a sum total of 1,696.3 grams. That is 103.7 grams of difference that the consumer is paying for. Now, Mr. Speaker, so this is why I talk about seepage. This is why I talk about the need for us to take sensible steps to intervene in a marketplace in the interest of protecting the consumer of this country, sir. I think it is a very dedicated issue, our matter that we must deal with in a very dedicated way. I honestly believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that while this legislation will bring about serious penalties, long before we start to talk about approaching anything with a big stick in Barbados, we have to have the educational conversation at all levels. I began, sir, by saying to you that whether you are the loftiest, highest, and most productive and respected exporter and manufacturer of product in Barbados, or whether you are the little old lady granny working with a little small scale in the marketplace, sir, the conversation must include all bar none. Because where we have to come to is a point where we understand as a country. We can look each other eye to eye and understand that this kind of thing, yeah, it can happen by mistake. This kind of thing can happen by mistake. But let us try to eradicate the mistakes. And for heaven's sake, let us make sure that it does not happen by design. Because in every instance where we have a consumer buying a product at a fixed price and then getting a product that is 103 or 104 grams of difference, that consumer, sir, has been disadvantaged. The cost of living for that consumer is already high, and that consumer's out-of-pocket is significant. And that comes at a personal consequence, sir, for the consumer and the consumer's family. The consumer's disposable income is not inelastic. Otherwise put, the consumer's disposable income does not stretch forever and ever and ever. It's like a cabinet minister. A cabinet minister, sir, is stymied by his ability to spend. Every time he catch his hand, the prime minister will say, as Minister of Finance, well, you're going to make a contribution to something else. That's been the reality. People don't believe it, but that's the reality. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is but one. I turn, sir, to some sugar samples. And labeling information on proper sugar packaging does not, in many cases, specify the gross or net weight. So you have discrepancies observed in net weights across all samples that were taken. All discrepancies were observed. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have a few retailers, again, they were arbitrarily chosen. So I don't want anybody to run off cock-a-hoop that this particular retailer or the next retailer, they were arbitrarily chosen. Random samples. And if you have random samples, Mr. Speaker, sir, it stands to reason that is not only peculiar to the people randomly selected, it is peculiar, sir, across the board. You're the trained man in this area, sir. I only did 1 or 2 small courses, but I know you were...
Structured random sampling also, sir.
Yeah, well, no, this was a structured random sampling.
Stratified random sampling also, sir.
So, Mr. Speaker, sir, you have like a retailer costs you less, selling a product called Barbados Reserve. And we all know what Barbados Reserve is. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the net weight, we are told, is 1,800 grams. But when you carry it inside the lab, you are seeing 1,848 grams. Now, that is the reverse of the problem. That is not a problem for the consumer now. That is a problem for the people who package in Barbados Reserve. My friend, the Honourable Minister for Industry, must be legitimately concerned that we are exporting product or preparing product that could be exported, but that you are charging on the basis of one weight, but giving away the people money because 48 grams gone for free. Same thing, Mr. Speaker, sir, when you're going at Massey, Barbados Reserve, net weight 1,800. In this case, the recorded weight 1,842 grams. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is why this bill is so important, because it comes back to the need for us to introduce into this country a level of precision in the measurement of that which we do and the conduct of our commercial affairs. It tells another problem there now, that you have Barbados Reserve being packaged, and that in spite of it being packaged by one entity, you are getting a weight told, a weight displayed and indicated to the market of 1,800 grams, but sometimes it might be 1,842, another time it might be 1,848. And there's another one before me, Mr. Speaker, sir, Carrollton, where it was 1,849. So, again, the issue here is the imprecision and the failure, sir, to take the necessary steps, not to protect the consumer, but to protect yourself as a commercial interest. You understand what I'm saying? So that when you take this situation and you look at it, then you will understand why the problem cannot simply be, oh, the government taxes are too high, or the cost of electricity involved in manufacturing is too burdensome, or there are too many overheads for us to bear. The labor market, the people ask, the unions want more money for the staff, but we can't find the money for them. Mr. Speaker, sir, the regulations are not necessarily the issue. All of these things may be legitimate concerns from time to time. But what we have failed to do is to drill down to see where the inefficiencies may exist at the core of business operations. That is part of what we have to get right. Because the more of these inefficiencies we are able to unearth, the more we become satisfied among ourselves, sir, that we can and must do better. Now, Barbados reserves at Popular, however, sir, was for the same 1800 net package, recorded in the lab at 1,686.4 grams. This is the complete opposite. Now, don't laugh, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is not a laughing matter. Because, sir, the inaccuracies reflect heavily on the capacity of enterprise to do business properly. It reflects, Mr. Speaker, sir, on people robbing themselves. It reflects, Mr. Speaker, sir, on people disadvantaging the consumer. It reflects, Mr. Speaker, sir, on our inability through a lack of precision and proper systems of measurement, sir, to protect this economy from losses and seepage. That's what is reflecting. And we have to do better. Now, Mr. Speaker, it didn't end there. I talk a little bit about bottled water. We're going to talk about bottled water. And come to you. There's a product, sir, called Glacial Pure. 500 milliliter bottle. Gross weight and net weight of a bottle of Glacial Pure. Gross weight of Glacial Pure was 521.118 grams. Net current volume of Glacial Pure is supposed to be 500 milliliters. The weight of the empty bottle is 25.658 grams. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, again, you see the disparity between the 500 milliliter and the actual volume. I want, sir, to go on this matter. The weight of the empty Glacial Pure water bottle, the gross weight and empty bottle weight show a small difference in net weight compared to labeled milliliter content labeling. So that 521.118 minus 25.658 equals 495.46 grams, as opposed to, or 495.46 milliliters, as opposed, sir, to 500 milliliters. Now that could be within what you would call a reasonable zone of error. But again, sir, that is part of what we are dealing with, the difference in net content of the bottled water in that particular sample. So then you go, sir, from that one sample, sir, to a wider sample, the random sample, where you're looking again at Carlton and Massey and Poplar and Chanel. And for the 500 milliliter bottle of Glacial Pure, at Massey, recorded lab weight, when you take it from Massey. This ain't got nothing to do with Massey, no, because Massey ain't packaging, ain't bottling it. They're just selling it. So you take it off their shelf, and you carry it in the lab, and you measure the bottle, you measure what you're getting. You're not getting 500 milliliters, you're actually getting 480 milliliters. Carlton, you get 503.59 milliliters. Popular, 513.18 milliliters. And Chanel, 514.038 milliliters. Now again, one product, presumably packaged, the same, bottled the same place. Mr. Speaker, sir, you are ranging for a 500 milliliter bottle from down at 484 all the way up to 514. In one case, Mr. Speaker, sir, the consumer is being disadvantaged. In other cases, Mr. Speaker, sir, you are selling more water than you've asked people to pay for, and therefore you're giving away a product for free, and you are disadvantaged. Is that allowed, Mr. Speaker? Then you are disadvantaging yourself. Black eyed peas. These black eyed peas would have been packaged by Hill Milling Company. Again, random samples, sir. Cost less, Chanel, Carlton. Indian Girl Black Eyed Peas is the product. Net weight 400 grams. Recorded weight in the lab 380 grams. Chanel Indian Girl Black Eyed Peas, net weight 400 grams. Recorded weight in the lab 384 grams. Carlton Indian Girl Black Eyed Peas, net weight 400 grams. Recorded in the lab 385.8 grams. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, in this particular case, all of the samples reflect that the consumer but Niger got to take it outside, though, you can't. All of the samples reflect that the consumer, sir, will be being disadvantaged in this regard. Now, sir, the point that I want to make here is that if I go into a supermarket as a consumer and I buy these products, and in each case I buy a product where there is this kind of situation, where I am being charged for something, but because of failures to have proper measurement systems implemented and superintended, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am paying more than what I get. I am paying for product I do not receive. Then, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am put in a disadvantageous position. And if you take that one individual and multiply him, sir, by 200,000 others, you realize, sir, the extent to which the consumer in Barbados is placed in a disadvantageous position. But what is worse yet, when you realize the extent to which people are being charged for goods they do not get, you understand, Mr. Speaker, sir, the way in which private enterprise is taking the skin off of the back of the consumer. This is what this piece of legislation, sir, is designed to correct. This is the kind of intervention, sir, that we are trying to bring resolution to. I give you another example. English potatoes. Again, sir, net weight, in this case, sir, bag of English potatoes, 226.796 grams. That is the store measurement inside Massey store. 226.796 grams. When that bag was taken to the lab, 2022.02 grams. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, instead of getting 2,267 grams of potatoes, I end up with 2,022 grams by paying for 267 grams of potatoes, though. And at Carlton, English potatoes measured in the store, or no, in this case, it was a package 10 pound, yes, measured in the store, 4,535 grams. When recorded in the lab, 4,724.30 grams. So I'm getting more than what I pay for. And the point I make here, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that there is a clear case of chaos. That's all I could call it. There's chaos in the private sector with regard to how these matters are being dealt with. Now, it tells me, because I do not attribute at first blush, let me repeat this, I do not attribute at first blush that there is mischief and malice in this. Because in some cases, the private enterprise entities are working to their own detriment. But what is clear that is failing to happen is that you do not have properly calibrated instruments of measurement, and that in some instances, it works to the detriment of the business person because he is selling something and thinking he's getting X amount of money for it, when really and truly he is shortening himself and putting himself at a disadvantaged position. The consequences of which may well be that he would then tell people who call him for a pay increase, no, I can't afford to pay because I haven't got the money he thought he would have had. The consequences of which are, sir, that he's not in a position to increase his employment in Barbados. Or on the other hand, you have a situation where the consumer is being disadvantaged, and the consequences of that I have already outlined. Because every time the consumer is disadvantaged, it impacts their bottom line. People are under pressure already in the economy. So that these are the kinds of concerns, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we want to highlight. Then there are some that are particularly egregious. So that in Chanel, you have a package of 7-pound potatoes taken off the shelf at Chanel, English potatoes, and you're told that it is 3,175.15 grams, a package 7-pound bag of potatoes. Carried to the lab, what you paid for was 3,175.15 grams. It turns out to be 2,761 grams. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, again, I think the case is made. There are some times when this can be within a margin of error that is acceptable. Then there are other times, Mr. Speaker, sir, when serious concern has to be raised. And wherever we are now, what I want to get across to people in the private sector is that we want this piece of legislation not just to be introduced and then come after private enterprise with a big stick, but we want there to be the necessary conversations. We want there to be the necessary partnership building with the National Standards Institution, so that if you have instruments of measurement that you have doubt in, if you have instruments of measurement that need to be recalibrated, if you have concern about the way in which your systems can be improved, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, the first step in my judgment, before we deal with the penalty provisions of this legislation, must be a window of opportunity that we get all and sundry on the same page, at the same time, in the same place, with a common understanding of what it is that the country is anticipating that it needs to be able to achieve. I turn to the question, sir, of whole chicken. Again, a similar type of tale, cost you less, selling Amir's Halal. Again, randomly selected product, randomly selected entity. Net weight, 1,742 grams. When taken from that freezer and put, sir, on the scale in the lab at the National Standards Institution, that becomes 1,563 grams from 1,742 that you would have paid for. Mr. Speaker, sir, at Massey, same Amir's Halal, 1,891 grams, actually became 1,878 grams. Super chicken, sir, at Carlton, 2,112 grams, became 2,275.6 grams. Which is why I say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you cannot attribute malice, because there are some instances where it is clear that it works to the detriment of those people who are doing the packaging or in some cases, the manufacturing. And the problem, therefore, sir, suggests, or it is suggested that the problem, therefore, is the type of problem that this legislation will help us to cure and to correct. But to get there, we've got to get everybody to understand the challenges that we are up against and the need for there to be cooperation now and engagement of, cooperation with and engagement of the Barbados National Standards Institution, so that we would be in a position, sir, to have the kind of discussions that will enable us to collectively lift our game in this country. Now, sir, you go into the market, sir, the marketplace, where you want to buy some fresh fish, for example. And I think that this is really where we have to have even more robust efforts at having the kind of conversation we need to have. Because they say, you know, the data does not lie. And what the data suggests to me, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that there may actually be administrative practices which have to be corrected. And I don't want anybody for a moment to make the mistake of believing that because in the same way that a big supermarket will have an administrative practice, don't believe that a small vendor don't have an administrative practice too. It is just a different scale. But there's a way in which you operate as a vendor, and there's a way in which the supermarket operates. There are certain things that you do or do not do as a large player, and there are certain things that you do or do not do as a small player. That's what I'm talking about with administrative practices. But the only logical explanation, Mr. Speaker, sir, outside of wickedness, and I do not attribute this to wickedness, because as I said, sometimes you work to your own detriment. So you don't want to be wicked, you'll be wicked and foolish as well. It has to be, sir, that we have too many people on a frolic of their own. They are engaged in business, yes. This is a good thing. They're trying to be entrepreneurial and commercial. Good thing. But Mr. Speaker, sir, they need the necessary guidance, which has not, before this type of intervention that we're bringing to the House now, been available to the private enterprises in this country. So if you go in the cheapside market, sir, as they did, and they called for a dolphin, Mr. Speaker, sir, and the net weight of the dolphin, 8 pounds was requested. 8 pounds of dolphin. But then you leave the market, and you go from the market to the BNSI lab, and you put that dolphin on the scale. Instead of getting 3,628.74 grams, which is the 8 pounds, you get 2,200 grams. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the customer get unfair. Your constituent get unfair, though. What are you going to do about it? The solution has to be that we must now not just engage at the level of manufacturing in Barbados, but we got to engage at the level of the marketplace too. That's why I began, the very first thing I told you, Mr. Speaker, sir, today, from the lady in the market with her scale, all the way up to the largest exporters in Barbados, all bar none, according to what we are seeing, sir, all bar none need this type of assistance. And what perplexed me was how we could have had an economy in which an entity like the National Standards Institute, who should be the partner, the life partner of any business, sir, helping you not just to set standards, but helping you to maintain standards, helping you to prepare yourself, sir, to lift your game, to be more competitive, to be more sustainable, sir, that they only got 40 odd clients. But that made no sense. So that is why I commissioned a serious outreach by the BNSI to work with businesses of all sorts in this country, because we have to wrestle this problem to the ground. But that's just by going, the example I give you is about going into the marketplace, Mr. Speaker, sir, and calling for the dolphin. But you know, you can get vacuum-packed product as well. So you go to Ocean Fisheries, sir, or through Ocean Fisheries, you get another dolphin. It can be the same dolphin, obviously. You get another dolphin. And you call, sir, for 576 grams vacuum-packed. And you're charged for it, and you go along about your business. When placed on the scales in the lab, you actually got 500 grams of dolphin. Now, sir, again, I urge you, sir, I urge you to recognize that where a customer receives 3.15 pounds less, as happened in the fresh market, where the customer receives, Mr. Speaker, sir, as happened at the Warren's Deli in Massey. We went through all of them, sir. All. 2 starches and 1 meat and vegetables is the product ordered in the deli. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, you get that weighed. You've ever been in the deli? You get weighed. It isn't only Kelman that has weighed food. They weigh food at the deli at Massey too. 1,110 grams at the deli. 2 starches, 1 meat and vegetables. But then when you carry it from the deli, sir, to the lab, Mr. Speaker, sir, the calculated weight for the actual food is 1,059.1 grams. But you pay for 1,100. You get 1,059 grams. So you belly full, but you hungry. You understand, Mr. Speaker? And it goes on and on. A second one was done, 2 starches, 1 meat and vegetables, same deli, 930 grams was what was, it was labeled as, by the time you weigh it, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the lab, 800 grams. So that we have an issue that we have to be careful about. The discrepancies that I appointed this House to, Mr. Speaker, sir, are not intended to be attributed to any particular retailer or any particular manufacturer's quality assurances processes. It is a study that is not intended to vilify any company or any organization. I want to make that clear. It is not intended to point a finger of accusation at any particular entity. It is about non-conformance, Mr. Speaker, sir, with respect to standards of measurement that this bill is trying to ensure that all of Barbados complies to. It is about non-conformance with practices that will ensure that this country's consumers can, for the first time, benefit from an environment in which there is precision, a context, Mr. Speaker, in which the consumer is given certainty, a confidence, an environment, Mr. Speaker, in which your constituent, the constituents for the honourable members in this House, all of them, are given confidence, Mr. Speaker, sir. That is what this legislation is about. And the non-conformance issues, quite frankly, have been, well, this is not the totality of the study, but non-conformance issues are observed in all of the samples, all of the retail packaging firms, all of the manufacturing. And that is why, sir, I hasten to say it isn't that I want to attribute malice. I want, sir, to attribute the need for awareness. I want to attribute, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to ask our private sector now to take stock of some of the problems that they are encountering and that their consumers are encountering, and by extension that the country is encountering. Because in a word, this points to the seepage, I use that word again, the seepage of money. When you are trading across borders, it means you're losing foreign exchange. When you're trading within the four corners of Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir, it means that our consumers are losing their household income. They're losing their household income, Mr. Speaker, sir. You're buying lunch that you could have given your child for pocket money. But you don't have the money to give your child because you, sir, are spending it on food that you did not eat. You are, Mr. Speaker, sir, in a position where you are disadvantaged with respect to the alternatives you can have at your fingertips, whether you wish to save, whether you wish to invest, whether you wish to spend on recreation, whatever it is that you want to do with your hard-won, hard-fought income. Those are the issues that are confronting this country today. When we drill down, it means, sir, that we have to candidly be prepared to speak to Granny in the marketplace. We got to be prepared to speak to Uncle who's selling fish. We got to be prepared to speak to the lofty Mr. Jones who is driving his Mercedes, whatever S-Class, and parking it in a car park and sitting down in an air-conditioned office and presiding over a board of directors which is seeing $10 million in revenue every year, Mr. Speaker, sir, because down the chain there is seepage. That's what it is about. Now, that it did not come here before, perhaps is a matter of great concern because we, sir, should have been having this conversation with the country for a long time. I want to make this a document of the House, Mr. Speaker, so that it will be available for posterity. But I also want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it brings me to part of the other part of the solution that we have to look at. I've invited the Cabinet, sir, by way of a Cabinet paper, to agree to the creation of a national quality policy in Barbados. What do I mean by that? It is essential, sir, in my judgment as Minister of Commerce, that this country as a whole dedicate itself now to building out standards of operation and standards of service across Barbados. That from the smallest, the jet ski operator, who is not required to make sure that he maintains adequately his life preserver vest. When the life preserver vest breaks off or breaks apart because it dry rot in the ocean, and there's a tourist who can't swim, he is not required by law, Mr. Speaker, sir, or he was not required by law to have met a standard of operation. It is onerous, I get it, but I feel government must be there to help him get to the standard of operation we want to get to. Equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, the large contractor earning multiple millions of dollars in Barbados and out of Barbados every year employing several hundred people, sir, must have standards of service operation. That when the road is done paved, sir, and a year later, we have clear evidence of there being a thinner coat than was anticipated with respect to the asphalt put down, or that the sidewalk is crumbling, Mr. Speaker, sir, or that any of the other issues that the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister has to contend with through MTW. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, those are the standards of service that we got to hold to. You and I, Mr. Speaker, sir, at the bar. That these are there is none, bar none. Let us not try to find loopholes or ways to exclude anybody. The country must have a national quality policy, in my judgment. And that national quality policy, sir, has to be set by a committee, probably led by the same National Standards Institute, of persons who will help us not just to structure it, but give us as a country the opportunity to build out the way in which we can live it and enforce it. It is only through that collective endeavor, Mr. Speaker, do I genuinely believe that we're going to avoid this kind of thing that I had to present to the House today. It is all well and good to say that we are going to join international agencies. In this case, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think they call it the Convention du Mètre, which is the International Standards Measurement Agency. Mr. Speaker, it is all well and good to bring in new legislation, which will, in this case, go as far as to bind the Crown and hold the Crown liable, hold the state liable in the same way that we hold others liable, sir. But it is equally important, in my judgment, that as a matter of policy, we now translate that above and beyond just the things that we got to do to measure accurately. It is clear, I hope, from what I have said in the House today, that our ability to measure our systems of measurement in every area of activity which is economic has implications for better or for worse, depending on how you are managing that measurement process. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the economy is more than just about measurement. The economy is about standards of performance. And again, if you have, as we know we do, an already expensive jurisdiction, then, sir, this jurisdiction has to compete on the basis, sir, of value for money. It has to be that the quality of the performance in every area of economic activity is looked at with a critical eye and is refined and then refined again so that it can be the best possible level. And then once we can get that right, as I said before, it allows us to open doors to foreign markets. It allows us, sir, to trade across borders at a more rapid rate. It allows us, Mr. Speaker, sir, to derive foreign exchange from a multiple set of sources in a way that perhaps we cannot do because we are now not operating at the top of our game. And I think, sir, that national quality policy is one of those methods by which Barbados will be able, sir, to have everybody buy in and participate at all levels of the economy, in all spheres of economic endeavor, to get this country to being at the top of its game with a view to being first in class as a developing country in the world. I do not think it is beyond this, Mr. Speaker, sir. But it requires, as I said at the beginning, for us to be prepared to hold up the looking glass and to look at ourselves critically and to realize where we have failed and to accept that we have been on this zone, in this zone, sir. This is what I just said to this House. This study, Mr. Speaker, sir, tell you nothing that you didn't suspect. This study, Mr. Speaker, sir, has not told me anything that I did not suspect. And quite frankly, it has confirmed what I have heard people suggest, that this has been their experience. And if you get John Brown here in St. Michael, and Pat Thompson there in St. James, and Lucy Fields in St. Lucie, telling you pretty much the same thing about their one-on-one experiences, Mr. Speaker, sir. The time comes, I think, and has come, where we need now as a society and as an economy to face the reality and to wrestle it to the ground with a view to fixing it and putting us on the correct footing. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, I want to not just introduce this debate, but I want to beg leave for us to pause the process so that we can have further consideration of it, and for a variety of reasons, put us in a position then where we can come back to continue in the not too distant future. And with those words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read. No, I can't do it at this stage. But I thank you, sir.
All members in James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that further consideration of the bill be postponed.
Question that further consideration of this bill be postponed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill will be postponed. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 1:45 p.m.
Question that this honourable chamber be suspended until 1:45 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 1:45 p.m.